Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As we approach midlife, it's probably a sure bet that at least one in two of us has been married at least once, and perhaps in some cases even more than once. Now, if marriage is such bliss, and if love is such a thing that we want to hold forever, why is it that one out of every two marriages doesn't seem to work? What is it that we don't know? What is it that we're not doing? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today are authors of Secrets of Great Marriages, Real Truth from Real Couples About Lasting Love. And we're going to be talking about these very things. What is the secret behind having a great marriage and a great love life? Well, we'll go ahead and let our experts, Linda and Charlie Bloom, solve this great mystery for us. And I'd like to welcome to the program both Linda and Charlie Bloom. Thank you for being on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, good to be here.
So what have you discovered why one and two marriages work? Is that just selfishness on the part of one or both partners, or what's going on there?
Well, I think that people go into marriages not really appreciating how much time and effort they require to make them great. And they have some misconceived notions, like just because we love each other, it's all supposed to just be there for us.
Right.
And they don't have the concept that you really have to learn some skills, how to express yourself well, how to tell the truth without blame and judgment, how to manage differences and manage conflict, how to problem solve, how to draw boundaries. There are many components that go into making a relationship wonderful. Love is terrific for a starter. It's a huge, powerful, energetic, but there are some skills and some things that people need to learn to put together with the love to make the relationship great.
Any thoughts from you, Charlie?
Well, I think when I think about what is involved in really creating relationships and how much most of us tend to bring baggage to it, and what's required in order to really create an optimal connection with another person on a lifelong basis, it's surprising to me that only 50% fail. It's really a much, like Linda's saying, it's a much bigger undertaking than we realize, and it does require the development of skills. Excuse me, if we don't have a realistic understanding of what is involved, we're going to set ourselves up to be disappointed and to blame either ourselves or the other person, rather than appreciating that this is a learning experience and it's kind of ongoing. And the more we learn, the easier it gets. But there's a pretty steep curve at the beginning of the process, and it does flatten out after a while. But if you don't have the commitment or the stamina to hang in there and get through some of the challenging times, the odds are not good.
It's really interesting when it comes to marriage how we tend to mirror our partner in such a way that, how's the best way to say this, that they begin to do things that we don't like, and those are triggers that within ourselves we tend to not like about ourselves. And as you talked about earlier, the idea of blaming someone without judgment instead of just saying the truth without judgment at the same time. It's really quite fascinating how this dynamic works.
Absolutely. And, there's always an infatuation stage at the beginning of a relationship, and people just think that each other is so adorable, and she looks like an angel to me, and, this period of being in infatuation does come to an end. Some people get months out of it. Some people get a year or even two at the most. Mm-hmm. But everybody has to leave the Garden of Eden. And then what looked so angelic before can start to look demonic. And when people start blaming the other person, when they start feeling victimized by the other person, that's when the trouble begins. But it's also the opportunity to look more deeply inside the self to see what's being mirrored back to us. Mm-hmm. And most couples, if they take that on as a challenge, to see what you are mirroring back to me that I'm not okay on in myself, they find that they get a whole lot out of that process. They learn so much more about themselves. It's a humbling experience, and people do end up becoming more compassionate, more tolerant, more accepting, more understanding, and more forgiving out of that process, if they really take it on.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, you profile 27 different couples that average about 30 years worth of marriage. I mean, so you take a look at 30 years. I mean, these are people who are all in. Let's talk about some of the things that they discuss in there that you would consider to be the secrets, if you will, to share with our listeners that they were able to, I guess, create or be involved with, which kept their marriage alive.
Well, let's start with the thing that I think both Lynn and I agree is probably the most important quality that they shared in common. It's not so much a quality as it is a skill, and that's the ability to manage differences effectively. And they didn't all come into the marriage highly skilled in the art of conflict resolution, but they learned on the job. And the thing about dealing with differences is that differences are really inevitable. It's actually the differences that we have, different styles, different personalities, different traits, different ways of being, that make our partners attractive to us. So we have to start with the understanding that there will be differences, but there doesn't have to be conflict. And conflict is what happens when people are uncomfortable with the differences, or they're threatened by them, and then they try to convert the other person into their point of view, or try to change them or make them more like they think they should be. So we all know what that's like, either to be on the receiving end of that kind of a process, or to be doing it ourselves to somebody else. And so the couples that we worked with, of course, all had the same tendencies that all of us do, is, we want things to go the way we want them to go. But they really learned how to work with each other in a way that didn't pour gasoline on the fire, that didn't inflame the situation, and that they were able to really come to terms with those differences in ways that were that resulted in deeper understanding and a deeper level of respect and trust in the relationship. So I think that is a really big factor, the ability to not only accept the inevitability of differences, but to appreciate differences and to see how they can really enrich the relationship, and then to work with them skillfully.
So it sounds to me that two people actually come together, and I think this is one of those key elements to making a marriage great, is that they come usually with different sets of beliefs. And the idea sometimes is that they need to support and actually protect those beliefs rather than trying to be a little more adaptable and workable with each other. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. Everybody comes from their own history, from their own lineage. Even if you're the same ethnic group, even if you're the same religious group, your family style might be very different than your partner's. And we totally believe in this old adage about opposites attract. We think there's some very deep knowing part of ourselves that's attracted to somebody who's different than we are. And we don't usually call it opposites attract as much as complements attract. They're complementary to us. We would be bored by somebody that was just like us. So we're magnetized to somebody who's quite different. Maybe their values are even a bit different, but definitely their styles and their history. And that can be not divisive, but enriching if you really take the attitude of curiosity and wonder. I want to understand how it is that you see things the way you see it. I want to understand why your preferences are the way they are. And that can be really good for a relationship, really expansive for the person who may have been maybe a little bit too comfortable in their way of doing things.
Now, talk about the couples and how you came to find them and have them participate in your book, Secrets of Great Marriages.
Well, we started with a handful of couples, maybe 6 or 7 couples that we knew personally, we had a pretty good idea when we started about what we were looking for in a couple, and it wasn't just that they had stayed together for a long time. I mean, we all know.
Well, in some cases, you actually had a couple or some couples profiled in here who had actually been married before for, in some cases, pretty reasonable lengths of time, 17 and 20 years in one particular case.
That's right. That's right. Although there's an average of 30 years that these guys have been together for, there's a number of them who have been previously married. Mm-hmm. For the majority, this is their first marriage. But yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they told us was that the couples who had been previously married was that although they weren't able to make their first marriage work, they did learn a lot from the process of trying, and the second time around they were able to find somebody with whom they could really do the work together, which does make a big difference. I mean, if you have somebody there that you're in a committed partnership with, who's really able and willing to to step up to the plate and play with you and to do their own work, which basically has to do with a willingness to look at yourself when things are getting a little ragged around the edges, rather than just get into a blame game with your partner. Mm-hmm. So that was a real important criteria, that people had the capacity and the willingness to really look at themselves and not just stay in a position of blame and fault and judgment.
Now, is there a possibility, and either of you can go ahead and take this one and run, that when it comes to marriage, a lot of times, one of the things I consider, for instance, are people who are young and they get married. It's high school sweethearts, you just got out of college, or you just left the house, you found somebody, you fall in love, you get married, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years later, you're divorced. And they say one of the big reasons for divorces usually is money. Well, money is kind of one of the mirroring belief systems right there by itself. But mm-hmm. when you take a look at marriage in and of itself, it's really hard to pose this particular question. It's a matter of the idea of what you expect from it, I guess. And is that usually sometimes what the problem is, where they just don't know who they are well enough to know what it is they really want from marriage?
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. And the people who got married again, who were in our study, they talked about that first marriage. Sometimes it wasn't really a good fit with them because they had made the choice so early in life, before they really knew themselves well enough mm-hmm. to know what they really wanted. I have always told our kids, who are now, my son is 35 and my daughter is going to be 30 on her next birthday, wait until you're more established in your life before you make a choice, a life partner, because it's more apt to stick if you're more grown up and really know who you are, you know where you're going in your career, you've gotten your academic degrees, you've dated a lot of people, and you know what kind of a person would really suit you. And I'm grateful that my kids actually took influence from me about that, because I really do think it helps to position you well. These people who decide when they're still in their teens or even early 20s, it's dicey. You know, it's a gamble, even if you're more sophisticated and more experienced in life. It still is a gamble. You might not know exactly who it is that you're getting. Mm-hmm. But I think it increases the chances of longevity and to be happy in that long relationship if you're more grown up yourself.
It's interesting, back in the 1980s when there was, I believe it was Barbara DeAngelis was doing a program called Making Love Work. And I just happened to be flipping through the channels, and she said something that I thought, that stuck with me actually ever since. And it says, we tend to fall in love with people because of the way that they make us feel. And I found that really an interesting perspective. What's your take on that?
I think that's absolutely true. In fact, when we say to somebody, I love you, what we're actually saying is, I am in love with the feeling that I have when you and I are together, when we connect. I love that feeling. And what we tend to do is we tend to project onto the other person the idea that they are the source of this feeling that we're having. And so we fall in love with them. And when we do that, we obviously become attached to them personally because we believe that they are the source of this wonderful feeling of goodwill and happiness and joy and pleasure and all these these wonderful aspects of this feeling that we call love. But of course, they are not the source of it. They're the catalyst. They are activating something within us and it's not simply psychological or emotional, but it's biochemical too. There are hormonal processes that are going on, and we're getting high. and so, yeah, I love the way I feel when we're together. Mm-hmm. But as soon as things don't go well and something interrupts the flow of those hormones, the person that we love can very quickly become the source of our pain. So I think that Barbara's absolutely right when she says that. And then the challenge, of course, is to understand that it's the feeling that we really are in love with. And so when we can learn how to promote that feeling with this person, we can love and respect them without being attached to them personally, quite to the same degree.
It's really interesting why I wanted to bring that perspective up, because you can see that with the couples that have been profiled who have shared their stories and secrets of great marriages is that you start off with that honeymoon stage. You really know that there's a real potential here for a true connection, of the ability to adapt, the ability to grow, the ability to get to that point that we all believe we have right in the beginning. Oh, I love you unconditionally. Well, we'll talk about that in 6 months to a year and see if that's
right.
True, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In 6 months, we'll see.
Right. But, what's funny is that eventually, as you allow that time and you allow that commitment and you actually do the work, as they talk about here in this book, that an inversion love process comes. And it's kind of an interesting word to use, but it inverts itself to a kind of love and commitment that you could never have fathomed before just by sticking with it and following, some of the practices these couples have shared here in this book.
It's so much deeper than that early stage. Mm-hmm. That infatuation stage, we really don't know the person very well yet. So we fill in all the vacant spots with our projection, our fantasy of Prince Charming and Princess Charming. Mm-hmm. When we really get to know each other, particularly when we see that there's some flaws there, that we didn't get the prize, that we aren't necessarily the prize ourselves, mm-hmm. that we are all so flawed, we're all so in process, and that it's a package deal. And then once somebody knows you and they see your magnificent failures and your feelings of inadequacies and your little neurotic ways and, all of these things that we have that are imperfect, and they love you anyway. They love you as is with your imperfections. That is a very deep and mature type of love. And as far as I'm concerned, it beats that infatuation stage, hands down. I feel so sorry for the people who lose their relationship right at that moment, because they probably had all the great raw materials to make something wonderful out of their relationship, and they just lost heart. They didn't hang in.
Mm-hmm. I know there was a good few years ago I did profiled a book. It was about marriages, but it was more of a perspective of, the long term. You've been in the long term and what that is like. It's sort of like marriage fits like a good old shoe, kind of a thing. So I took a look at this book, and it had really neat illustrations in there, real soft, almost cartoon-like images. And I passed that on to my mom and dad, and who were actually, that was my mom's third marriage, I think. But they've been together since 1974, I believe. But anyway, I passed that on. I said, take a look at this and see what you think. And so I called him on it later, and he says, that describes how marriage and relationships in the long term are. It's comfortable, like that good old comfortable lazy boy that you've had for years. You can just count on these things. And so you take a look at the difference between the infatuation stage, where, as you said, they're in the shadows, so you fill in the blanks, to the point where you really understand the person in such a way that you just feel comfortable being around them no matter what really happens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's the stage that you really can't get to without going through some, major life challenges. And, and in the process of going through them together and working things out, we find that comfort, we find that trust, we can sink into the reassurance that I am seen, I'm known, and I'm loved for who I am, because this person has seen all of my shadowy parts, I've seen theirs, and neither one of us have gone anywhere. So they can take me in all of my splendor and all of my imperfections. And there's something that is so, comforting and just deeply reassuring to know that it really allows you to settle into being yourself in your life, because here the most important person in your life is basically saying, I ain't going anywhere. I love you the way you are. It doesn't mean that I'm never going to get upset or frustrated or angry, but I ain't going anywhere, and I'm committed to working things out with you. It just takes so much of that edge off of what we feel in the early stages of the relationship, where we're insecure and afraid that we might alienate or offend the other person, or we might lose them, or they might do something to upset us. Mm-hmm. So when you get to that stage, there's something that's really deeply gratifying about that.
Not everybody sees it as so desirable to get to that point where the relationship is so comfortable, like the old recliner or like the old shoe, because they think it's going to get stale and boring. And I think one of the themes that comes through all of the stories in the book is these people are not bored and boring. They're alive, they're vital, they're passionate, they're contributing to their communities in a myriad of ways. But they've got this solid stock of a base camp to be able to climb the peaks, metaphorically speaking, or literally speaking, because they've got this safe place to come back to that's well stocked. So it's anything but boring. This is the launching pad for our life, because when the relationship is stable, when the commitment is strong, when we don't have to worry about losing the other person, when we're not in recovery from any ugly, nasty scenes anymore, then this energy gets freed up to do all kinds of creative and fun things.
That's very exciting. Now, I'm on your website. I believe it's bloomwork.com?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that you have video clips on the website of different interviews you've done on television shows here. Have you been asked, and what is your take, for instance, and I wanted to bring this up because we seem to be so celebrity enamored and driven, but these guys are just as busted up as the rest of us, even more so because of the demands of what their careers put them in. But the Tiger Woods situation, I remember when that came up, and I was talking with a couple of women about this, and I said, well, kind of look at the standard everybody's put this guy up to. You don't think he's ever going to have a breaking point? That's just crazy. But what's your take on the Tiger Woods situation?
Well, I think, first of all, you're absolutely right about the standard that that you're subject to when you're under that kind of scrutiny by the public, that it is impossible to live up to. And the other side of that is that when you have that kind of glorification, then it's very difficult not to believe, as Tiger Woods himself acknowledged in his first interview after the affair that you're not subject to the same laws that ordinary mortals are subject to.
Exactly.
You really do start to believe that you have a different set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then you start acting accordingly, and of course, the obvious happens. You get caught, you get nailed, you get humbled, and then you take your fall. You go from hero to zero, which is what happened with him, and he's still very, very much in the process of digging his way out of that. And I think the consequences of that take a while to recover from. So we see a lot of examples of that, but I think so much of it just has to do with losing your perspective. Losing humility doesn't mean that you feel like a small person or that you walk around with your head down. Humility really means that you have a realistic understanding of what your place is in the world, and you lose that humility when you become a celebrity. So I'm not making excuses for these guys. I'm just saying that it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
Well, no, you're actually making a very clear point, and the reason I brought this up was just for this reason, is that Tiger Woods, celebrities, rich, poor, it really doesn't matter. The fact is the secrets of great marriages are very universal regardless of who you are.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
Right. Nobody is immune to the temptations. There's no divorce-proof marriage, even if you've been together for many years. You don't ever get to put it on cruise control. And I've heard a lot of people say that marriage is for sure doomed, and I don't feel that way. I feel like they have a chance. Now, I believe it's a long shot, and they've got a lot of work ahead of them. But I think when a person is humbled like he is now, that he may be really examining his life. I hope that he is. He may be open to appreciation and gratitude for his wife and his children and an intact family in a way that he took it for granted before. I would love to see them make it. There's so many people that believe that is such a heavy blow, an affair, particularly a secret affair, and the lies on top of the affair. And there's no doubt about it. It's a heavy blow. But it does not have to be a death blow to a relationship. And some of the couples in our book who are exceedingly happy married, they volunteered the information that they had affairs in their history. When they were younger and dumber and more ignorant and didn't know better, they weren't conscious enough. They strayed and went looking for love in the wrong places, and they paid attention and learned something from it, and they made a complete recovery. All of the trust was restored and then some.
That's very encouraging to know that, especially for listeners out there who are thinking, oh, gee whiz, I'm starting to hear some skeletons come out of my closet. Is there a chance? And you sometimes kind of wonder, what the next step is from there. But I'd encourage people who are listening to the program today, Secrets of Great Marriages, take a look at this, and you'll find that these are pretty much universal laws, if you will, of what makes relationships just work in the first place.
It is. And, these people didn't read this book before they got married, or any book. In their words, it's all on-the-job training, and you don't get told what the rules are. You really learn through trial and error. I mean, if you engage in a relationship with any amount of awareness and consciousness, you will notice through trial and error what the consequences are, what the effects are of certain behaviors, of certain kinds of communications, and you'll see that some things promote more goodwill, more generosity, more care, more trust, more respect, and then other responses don't. And that's what these couples simply learned from their experiences. And if there was one thing that I would say really runs through all of the stories, and there's, of course, more than one, but this is the one that I particularly think is the most powerful. It's the ability to learn and integrate the lessons of your experiences and put the corrections in so that you don't keep cycling through the same old patterns, that you interrupt those patterns, and that you're able to break out of them instead of staying in the ruts that so many couples stay in over and over again.
Secrets of Great Marriages is the book. Our guests today, Linda and Charlie Bloom. Could you give people your website? I gave it earlier, but we'll go ahead and give it out again.
Sure. It's www.bloomwork, BLOOMWORK.com. And the website has a lot of really great information on that that's freely available to people about... there's articles on it from our newsletters that go back a few years, and our schedule is on there for workshops. As you mentioned, the video clips, people can get to find out more about our books from watching us on some of the TV shows that we've been on. So there's also a link. The book is available. Both of our books are available in just about all bookstores, and there's a link on the website to order it if they want to order it through Amazon.
So I would say on behalf of the three of us, to our listeners out there, if you're in a marriage, we dare you to grow.
That's the challenge.
Linda and Charlie, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. This is always a fun subject for us.
Great.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. And bloomwork.com is the website. Find out and sign up for their newsletter as well. Thank you very much for being on the program today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Be sure to also visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter and also visit us at our blog where we archive our shows, have great multimedia information there for you to use and pass on to others as well. We thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, live your day past halfway.